This is Outnumbered. I'm Andrea Tanteros, and here with us today, Harris Faulkner, Sandra Smith, and commentator and national spokeswoman for the Libre Initiative, Rachel Campos-Duffy. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, we welcome back Fox News contributor and Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, Pete Hegseth. And Pete, today you are outnumbered.
I am grateful to be.
Yay! Yes, and there's an extra, we don't know if it's a...
Do we know?
We don't know. It could be two.
Can we say?
Yeah, sure.
Can we say?
I don't want anybody to
We've got a special delivery. We don't know if it's going to be another woman on the couch or one lucky guy. So you're outnumbered.
It could be two? No. I definitely.
Good news.
And just so everybody who might be keeping count, who love you so much, this is number 8.
Number 8.
God bless you.
Bless you.
And your husband.
Yes.
Because
so actually at home you are outnumbered.
I am outnumbered, and I suspect that after this snowstorm there might be a baby boom here in New York.
Oh, wow. Oh. Well, you're an expert.
Cold Wisconsin winters.
All right. Well, you said boom, so let's do it. Talk about a boom. 5 days until the Iowa caucuses, a big shakeup that could have a major impact on the Republican race. The GOP frontrunner, Donald Trump, saying that he'll skip tomorrow night's Fox News Google debate, partly, he says, because the network refused to remove Megyn Kelly as a moderator. The reaction pouring in from Trump's rivals for the nomination.
I think anyone running for president of the United States owes it to the people of Iowa to have the humility to come in front of you, to make the case, to answer the hard questions, to look you in the eyes.
It really doesn't matter because the debate is about dissemination of information to the people. So it really doesn't matter who's on the stage.
If he doesn't want to be there, that's okay with me. But I'll tell you this, the American people should wonder. You know, if you're not willing to show up when everything isn't going your way, exactly the way you want to, that's not the way the job as governor goes.
If this is the year that a person can win the Iowa caucuses by just raising money and then going in and blasting with TV and radio ads, I think it could be the end of the Iowa caucus as we know it.
All right, so is this move unpresidential? Pete Hegseth.
Boy, it sure feels like it. This is a choice, right? His hand wasn't forced. There was no unbecoming circumstances. He chose to draw a line, and he's now dug his heels in, and will not, if he sticks with it, is not going to have an opportunity to make a final message to the Iowa caucus goers. Now, he's making the calculation that it won't matter, that doubling down on his tough stance is what people love about Donald Trump. The question here is, though, what's the stance that he's taking? And the way he's going about doing it is the way he's always done it. I don't like it. But, hey, a lot of things he's done I haven't liked, and he's surprised me because they've been effective. So.
Well, the question now isn't whether we like it or not. The question is, Harris, will the voters of Iowa punish him for this?
This is up to them whether or not it's presidential. I will say this, though. I was a little curious when Ted Cruz, who just ran that soundbite of him. But then a few hours ago, we learned that he's challenging Donald Trump to a no moderator present one-on-one debate before the Iowa caucuses. So why would he do that exactly? Like, who does that benefit? And by the way, I mean, Trump has said he's going to have this, I guess, dueling time period event. So he's arguing that he will get to talk to viewers.
All right. So, Sandra, on that point, Trump releasing a statement last night saying, instead, I'm going to hold a rally. It's going to benefit veterans. It's going to benefit wounded warriors. Is that a smart move?
Well, it's always a smart move to host an event that benefits the veterans. It's the timing of it, I guess, that we're asking about here, Andrea. And it's easiest for us to sit here and say, you know what, this isn't the right thing for him to do. This is unpresidential. He should be answering any question that helps voters decide who is the best person for the job. But guess what? He has been on the media rounds. He is answering all the questions. He is talking to all the reporters. He's going on all the networks. So you can't criticize him for not putting himself out there and letting people know who he is. So I don't know that that is part of this decision not to perform in the debate.
Yeah, Rachel, I think it's a good point. I mean, Trump can take the cameras wherever he goes. So this isn't his last opportunity to get his message out because he's everywhere.
Absolutely. And I think this really is about the fact that in this respect, he's very self-aware that he's not that good at debates. It's not his high point. And he knows that Ted Cruz is sharpening his knives against him. And this is, I think he's using Megyn Kelly as an excuse to really, you know, remove himself. It's a risk, though, because, as we know, a third of the voters have not made up their mind. And more importantly, he's gone after Megyn Kelly in a very personal way that I think could hurt him with women who he's already
All right, so on that point, I mean, you mentioned his debate performance. I don't think that's an issue. I think Donald Trump does pretty well at the debates. The question is, Pete Hegseth, Rachel's point about Twitter and the things that he's saying, could it affect him with women? Take a look at this tweet. This is just breaking. This is from Donald Trump this morning. I refuse to call Megyn a bimbo. Instead, I will only call her a lightweight reporter. So, Pete, does this hurt him with women?
It should. It really should. Of course, there's a tape from 2011 that was played this morning on Fox and Friends of him talking about what a great reporter she is and how amazing she is and how wonderful she is. So he's throwing the bombs he needs to throw, or he thinks he needs to throw, that are very unbecoming in my stance.
But does it hurt him?
Who calls a woman a bimbo today? Really? You may take issue with whatever they believe or whatever they say, but it's just childish. It's what he does. I will say this, though. When it comes to the debate stage, it'll be interesting to see whether or not he's a looming presence or whether about 10 or 15 minutes in, it just settles in and we're not talking about Trump anymore.
So that's my question. Does this open the door for the other candidates now to put their plans forward? About an hour and 6 minutes ago or so, because I just happened to catch it, Dr. Ben Carson put out his plan for destroying ISIS. It's a video, and it's the Heal, I wrote it down, the Heal, Inspire, Revive campaign.
Nobody's talking about it.
No one.
What's interesting is, what if, right, but what if tomorrow night or on forward before Iowa caucuses, people can get their messages out there without him being at the lectern? I mean, I would imagine that would be a challenge, or are they all going to focus on Donald Trump's not being there?
Well, and that's the conversation right now, right? We're all talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He continues to succeed.
That's the genius.
That's the conversation.
The man is a genius. Everyone else are some level politicians. He is a marketer and a PR
So the
genius.
question is this going to benefit him or is this going to hurt him when he goes into Iowa, and how will this affect him in New Hampshire? Really, politically, is this a smart move? And to your point, Harris, there are 7 GOP candidates who actually will be on the main stage tomorrow night. They include Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, Ohio Governor John Kasich, Dr. Ben Carson, and New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and Senator Rand Paul. To make the cut, candidates need to be in the top 5 standing in an average of 5 recent state polls in Iowa or New Hampshire, or within the top 6 in an average of 5 recent national polls. So now the question is, who can break out with Trump on the stage?
I wonder, if there was any thought. Remember, Senator Rand Paul decided that he wasn't going to be in the last debate. I wonder if there's any given thought to, if you're not there, do you have a chance to better get your message to the people in terms of Trump's people? And for everybody else on that stage, if he's not there, remember, he's been soaking up anywhere from 36 to 39% of the talk time during an entire debate. That's a big chunk of time, which almost goes with where he is in the polling. That's a big chunk of time where you could talk about anything else. So who's strong on what? I know what you're going to say. People are watching for the economy, especially with the bumpy ride we've had recently.
They're watching for the economy, but if we were honest, we're going to say, are they each going to plot their attacks against Trump while he's not there and not really able to respond?
Or does Ted become the new target? Because he's the next
Maybe that's
big guy
why
there.
He wants to go one-on-one with Donald Trump.
Here's how I see it going down. I see all the candidates doing what they're doing today, predictably launching attacks at Trump. He's too chicken, come debate me on the phone. But they're going to start to fire at Cruz immediately. And I think Chris Matthews said, and how do you feel about this? If a Republican said it, he'd get in trouble. But Chris Matthews said, who wants to watch a debate with 2 Cuban guys?
I know. He actually, Chris Matthews actually said that Cubans aren't really Hispanics, which is, really a weird thing to say. But yeah.
Look, Rachel, what do you think about the debate stage Thursday with the other candidates?
I think Ted's going to be. I think Ted has the most to lose because I think he had, like I said, I think he sharpened his knives. He was ready with all his barbs against Trump. And I think the opportunity is for Christie, Rubio, and the others to step up.
Absolutely. I think at this point people have accepted that Trump and Cruz are in this top tier sort of themselves. The question is who comes in third in Iowa and New Hampshire, or potentially comes in second in New Hampshire. That's a Rubio question. That's a Christie question. And the consolidation of a Rubio, Christie, Bush, Kasich, someone's got to consolidate that support at some point. Yes. I think that's the hidden debate. You're going to see a lot of shooting from those folks at each other because they know, that's why Bush is spending so much against Rubio.
But think about what they're shooting at each other for, Harris. I mean, this morning you have Jeb Bush shooting at Marco Rubio for misusing a credit card. Jeb Bush is shooting at Donald Trump for not being a Christian. They're attacking Rubio on his attendance record. They're going after Cruz on something else that's petty. I mean, their attacks are weak and meager.
Nobody has figured out what Bernie Sanders is figuring out, as he got nearly 20,000 people across a couple of events just in the last few days. And that is, if your message is positive, will people flock to you? I mean, look again at Dr. Carson. I know you say nobody's focusing on him right now, but just the heal, he's a doctor, you get that. The inspire and the revive. I mean, it's an opposite message. If they can sell what they have that's good for America, can't they make that their message? Because nobody's going to vote on what they think about each other.
It's going to be this is an incredibly important debate to watch tomorrow night, and it's going to be incredibly important to watch how the candidates position themselves, act, behave, what they say without Donald Trump on that stage. That is going to be a dynamic that we should all watch.
And will the eyeballs follow Donald Trump?
Some will.
If he goes live from this rally, what does that do when you get the ratings numbers? I mean, are the cameras going to follow him to this event that he's doing for veterans and wounded warriors? We all have to wait and see. Exciting stuff. All right, and you can't miss this debate, presented by Fox News and Google. It's the last time that we will hear from the candidates on a stage like this before the Iowa caucuses. Things kick off at 7 p.m. Eastern with Bill Hemmer and Martha McCallum. Then at 9 p.m., Brett Baer, Megyn Kelly, and Chris Wallace take over. It's all coming up tomorrow night, right here on Fox News Channel. And after the San Bernardino terror attack, mayors from mid-sized cities say that they're more scared than ever before, that they could be targeted next. What needs to be done to protect Americans? And if you want a license to carry a handgun in one city, listen to this. You will have to submit what critics call an essay on why you deserve one. Yeah, haven't written one since your SATs, I bet. Well, we'll debate whether or not these new rules are really necessary. And right after the show, catch more From the Couch on the web. It's going to be hot today. I can feel it. Outnumbered Overtime. Log on to foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click that tab. I'm guessing you want to talk about the debate, so tee up those questions. Harris is going to log on along with Sandra, and we will answer them after the show.